Seachta Marker Cahasig Arainta Kadama Lesh and Seachta Derek O'Leary.
I got to Cian Corla, and before I begin on 10 centres first, I just want to acknowledge the members of our Ukrainian community who are stood outside the gates today, and it's unthinkable really. So how large the scale of the war and a war in Europe is, it's unthinkable to relate that down to the personal stories of the people who are stood outside the gate. So it doesn't touch on this debate, but I wanted to use the opportunity. Minister, I want to thank you and congratulate you for this policy. I've read it in depth, I've read it in detail. It would have been nice to hear those details referred to in some way, shape or form in some of the previous contributions. I would have described this as mission critical to the work of this government. I would have also, worked closely with the likes of Mark Deary, whose role I want to acknowledge. I know Minister Malcolm Noonan was very close to this policy being brought through in government. And I think it's really important. I suppose Waterford sometimes is described as a microcosm of Ireland in that we have Ireland's oldest urban centre, but we also go into kind of smaller towns and villages and then out into a very rural environment. And I think this policy has huge potential, particularly in places like Cappoquin, which was involved in the Town and Village Renewal Scheme previous to now. Lismore, which is more or less right beside it, has huge vacancy on an absolutely outstandingly beautiful main street. My own hometown of Tramore, where you see that above the shop living not fully utilised. I'd like to acknowledge as well the role of the Heritage Council and that collaborative town centre health check model, which has kind of been built into the town centres first model. I think the Heritage Council town centre health checks, they demonstrated that our urban spaces are among the least active in Europe. And the economic burden of vacancy is felt very heavily in our towns and does contribute to issues like sprawl and issues like commuting that Deputy Barry described. Very much like to commend the work of the programme coordinator, Alison Harvey, who noted Irish town centres have a rich critical mass of heritage assets with hundreds of years of living history in our buildings, streets, parks and squares. And indeed, I see today that the EC Epsom has selected the Collaborative Town Centre Health Check Programme as best practice case study in Europe. The Town Centres First policy is very good. It's very good, Minister. There's 33 unique actions in it, which will give our towns the tools and resources they need to become more viable and attractive places to live, work, visit and run a business. We're talking about multi-billion euro investment, a very serious level of investment that is backing this up, not just through the TCF programme, but also through things like Housing for All and Our Rural Future. So we're seeing things like the Rural Generation and Development Fund, the RRDF, the URDF in certain cases, the Cree Conagh Fund, the Town and Village Renewal Scheme, which I mentioned earlier. And crucially for me, through that Town Centres officer, and particularly the town teams, what we're talking about is a bottom-up development, and we're really going to build capacity and skills within communities to allow communities to make those decisions about their own towns and villages. These are the people who know their towns and villages best. They're the people who are most invested in their villages, towns and villages. And if we upskill them and if we build capacity within the communities, that can be only to the good. And I find it exciting at this point, and that might be, I don't know, maybe a glib statement, but the level of policy coherence that we're now seeing between the likes of Town Centres First, Our Rural Future and Housing for All, that we're drawing different strands and different departments together in a real and meaningful way that I think is going to unlock huge potential across our country and help us in that balanced rural development piece, which is so important for places like Dublin. And I do acknowledge what Deputy O'Snoddick said. We also need to build our urban towns and villages, very important as well. I just want to give a mention, and Cian Corla, thank you for selecting me for a topical issue for later on, so I will be dealing with Sustainable Development Goals in more detail. But if I am talking about policy cohesion, I do just want to reference the absolutely excellent Sustainable Development Goals Toolkit for Business, which was developed by Chambers Ireland. And it gives, as well as Town Centres First, it gives that kind of first principles-led, bottom-up approach whereby we can begin to build in, be it sustainable development goals or other principles, that we build it in and across our policies in that coherent type of way that I think will help draw things together and maximise the benefits for it. So I'm very excited to have the chance to debate it today. Minister, I very much commend you on the work that you've done on what is an excellent policy, and I'm really looking forward to holding your feet to the fire to have it implemented over the remaining time of the government.
I do welcome the chance to speak on this policy, and I do welcome, Minister, your work and Minister O'Brien's work, Minister Noonan's work around the coordination and the cohesion that Deputy Cossey has just referred to. That's all very fine, though, at ministerial level. The difficulty is when it gets down to the ground. And I think that the ambition that the government may have and that this House may have around town centre renewal and rural renewal is not being met on the ground. I was really intrigued, and Deputy Cossey can probably speak to this, by the recent RT primetime report about what's happening in Waterford City, about the very proactive and aggressive way they're chasing CPOs as a local authority, which is in contrast to most local authorities who seem quite lazy and quite intimidated by law and by lawyers. Whereas I think I saw a figure that Waterford City Council, I'm not sure what, I'll come on to that whole issue later too, Minister, acquired 45 properties through CPO, got funding from the department and put them into housing, properties that had been empty or properties that had been derelict. That's the kind of productivity we need to see from every local authority, not the usual, oh, there's a CPO there, we're trying to find the owner, or there's a derelict property, we don't know where the owner is, we don't want to have any details, we don't want to go to court. And we need far more ambition, far more, dare I say, aggression in terms of taking on CPOs from local authorities around the country. And Minister, I think it will be worth your while to encapsulate what's going on in Waterford and ensure and set targets for it to be repeated right across the country. Because we do need this policy